Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Cara.
I'm literally jumping out of my skin at the moment. I don't know what I'm more excited about. Talking about this episode with Carol Tavris, or just getting this episode going so that everyone can listen to the phenomenon that is Carol Tavris.
I literally cannot stop talking to anyone I know
Me too.
about the book, about the idea of cognitive dissonance and self-justification. I did what we tell our listeners to never, ever do, because my oldest child called me and was like, "How was your day?"
And you answered.
And I answered in very, very long fashion, walking him through our interview with Carol. And I don't know if he was listening or not, but honestly, I don't care because it was so fascinating.
I mean, listener, let's start with this. We're interviewing, in this episode, we are interviewing Carol Tavris, with whom you are going to fall in love, if you don't already know her, about a book that was published when our oldest children were in preschool. This book, called Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me, is like, it's an instant classic I didn't know about for 15 years. It is amazing because it frames how we not just make decisions, but justify them and double down on them and remember them or misremember them in the most poignant, funny, smart, sassy, savvy way. So I think we should just get to it and let people listen to Carol, who I'll just, do a quick bio at the top, who is a social psychologist, a writer, and a lecturer. Her goal is to promote psychological science and critical thinking to improve our lives. She co-authored Mistakes Were Made with Elliot Aronson. And the subtitle, by the way, very significant, is Why We Justify Foolish Beliefs, Bad Decisions, and Hurtful Acts. We get to all of that in this conversation.
AKA my 20s.
Exactly. And you may recognize her name from a conversation on a prior podcast that we did with Avram Blooming, who is her co-author on the book Estrogen Matters: Why Taking Hormones in Menopause Can Improve Women's Well-Being and Lengthen Their Lives Without Raising the Risk of Breast Cancer. Carol is a font. I cannot wait for you to listen to this episode. Please send us your questions and comments, because 100% we will have Carol back.
So buckle up. You are about to have the ride of a lifetime. Carol, we are so happy to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
So the story that people do not know, but I'm about to tell you, is that Carol, who is the writing partner of Avram Blooming, they are the co-authors of Estrogen Matters. I met her at the Swell Conference in New York. And I had gone to meet Avram because we had just had him on the podcast. And I was sitting at the end of a row and I see a very elegant woman in a fabulous red blazer. And I looked at the program and I realized it was Carol, and she was getting ready to speak. And I went over and I introduced myself, and she said, "Are you Cara?" And I said, "No, I'm the other one." And she said, "It's so nice to meet you," because those of you who've listened to Avram's episode know that Cara has known Avram since before he was cool, since she was a teenager, and he wasn't cool.
Probably cool then.
He was cool then.
He was probably cool. And then Carol proceeded to blow the roof off of the Swell event. She was so dynamo. And I had said to her before she was dynamo, "We'd love to have you on the podcast." She said, "Oh, I don't know if there's anything more I can say." And then she got up there and blew my mind and blew everyone's mind. And it was so amazing. And listeners, your minds are about to be blown with this conversation. We have so many questions. We're not going to get to all of them because Cara and I cannot stop talking about the topic that Carol has just illuminated for our lives.
I mean,
Vanessa, I cannot follow this. I mean, whatever you think I'm going to say, forget it. No, we're going to stop now. Because number one,
that's what you say every time.
I cannot possibly be as funny as I was at that conference because that was, just admit it, a little X-rated, a little.
It was a scene. It was a scene.
Yes.
It was a scene. You're gonna do almost as well, Carol. How about that? Almost.
I mean,
as well.
Carol. We are going to talk about a lot of things, but we're going to focus the conversation around a book that was published in 2007 that I have gobbled up like it is a new read. And I have called everyone in my family and said, here's what I'm getting you for the holidays. You have to read this amazing book that
and how many editions have there been, Carol? Three?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The last one was 2020.
It's amazing. It explains, so let's just jump in with, the title, right? Let's just go there. Mistakes were made, but not by me. Come on.
You said that exactly right. Because that is the point. Mistakes were made, which one journalist called the past self-exonerative tense, which I think is just perfect for all you linguistic-minded people. No, my co-author, Elliot Aronson, on that book, a world-famous social psychologist, we were sitting around and talking about this phenomenon that he had been studying since he was a graduate student 50 years ago. And the combination of his knowledge of what cognitive dissonance is and my lifelong work, in effect, in applying it to our everyday lives. And we suddenly said, whoa, this might be a book of some use. And one of the most exciting things to me about this book is, everybody's heard of cognitive dissonance, it comes up all the time. John Stewart used it. He said, cognitive dissonance is when an environmentalist gets an SUV. Might as well be filling his gas tank with cognitive dissonance. And, because that's what it is. It's a simple idea with such powerful consequences. Cognitive dissonance is the discomfort we feel when two ideas collide with each other, contradict each other, or when a belief that we have contradicts an action that we're taking. And so that's, okay, so fine. But it's as uncomfortable as being hungry or thirsty and as motivating to reduce it. It's really hard to live with dissonance. For example, we found this wonderful tape that Sarah Silverman did about her great good friend Louis C.K. when he was, caught in that embarrassing sexual scandal. And there she is demonstrating cognitive dissonance. I love this man. I've loved him for 25 years. He's a wonderful friend. He's a wonderful father. I adore him. He's been fabulous to me. And he did this awful thing. Now, for most people, it's hard to live with the and. Right. We want to reduce dissonance, and we do it in one of two ways. We end the friendship or we minimize what the friend did. And it's the same with ourselves.
So, Carol, this applies to every corner of our lives, right? We could go down any number of pathways as you do in the book, everything from politics to family and all the wonderful things in between. We're going to apply the concept of cognitive dissonance to the role we play as parents, to the reality of teenagers. But I don't want to hold people back from recognizing the just unbelievable breadth that this topic applies in every single corner of our lives. Once you hear Carol talk, you won't be able to think about anything else but cognitive dissonance.
It's true. It's just like the more academic way of explaining I'm holding two things to be true, right? Yeah. Which is something that people say all the time. I say it all the time. And you explain it academically, intellectually, socially. It's amazing.
Well, thank you so much. One of the things, we get so many letters from people saying, I started this book thinking, this explains politicians and why they're such hypocrites. And then halfway through I was, this explains my family and my neighbors and my coworkers. By the end you say, this explains me, and my role in my own life story. Because usually we're so busy self-justifying Well, that's Eliot's wonderful term. Mostly what we do, given our belief that we are good, smart, wise, competent people, and now I give you information that you just did something stupid, foolish, unwise, idiotic, and wrong. What are your choices? Are you going to say, oh, thank you, Carol, for this really helpful bit of advice that contradicts my lifelong theory of child rearing? No, you're going to tell me where I can stick that study. We just, that's mostly what people do.
I thought we weren't getting X-rated, Carol, but apparently we're
that was an implied one. All right.
So what is really fascinating, you've defined cognitive dissonance, which is amazing, but what's so fascinating is the cascade of decisions and behaviors that people engage in to relieve themselves of the dissonance, right? You talked about the discomfort of the dissonance, and people are seeking to relieve themselves of that. So walk us through, we're going to talk about self-justification in a second, but I'm wondering if it helps to start with the pyramid of choice in terms of illustrating that cascade and then going into self-justification.
Sure, thanks. It's a metaphor that I think has a lot of power for people, a lot of reach for people. So we use it this way in the book. So imagine we do this was based on an actual study of students. So we'll use students as an example. Suppose you have, here's my pyramid. Look how graphically expert I am, right? Pyramid. Okay. Imagine you have two students at the top of this pyramid and you ask them, what's your view about cheating? And then cheating, it's not a good thing. You shouldn't cheat. It's bad. But it's not the worst crime in the world. It's just, cheating. There it is. That's their opinion about cheating. And they're pretty close together in their views. Now they're taking their final exam in this course. And they draw blank on a crucial answer. And you know how students are. If I don't get this right, I'm going to fail this exam. I'm going to flunk the course. I'm going to not get into graduate school. My mother will hate me. My cat will leave me. It will be a disaster. So now what do? They're frozen on this answer and they see their student next to them. They can read her answers. They have a chance to cheat. One cheats by reading her answer because the grade is so important. And the other says, integrity is more important. I'm not going to cheat. So one cheats and the other doesn't. In that decision, they have taken their first step off the pyramid. And now, because every time you make a decision, you will be in a state of dissonance between what you did and what you didn't do. Mm. So the minute you make a decision, you will look for evidence that that was the right decision, and you will ignore any ideas or information that it was the wrong decision. That's how dissonance works, to keep our beliefs consonant with our behavior. So the student who cheats will now think cheating is not such a bad thing. Oh, please, everybody cheats. It's just this once anyway. It's just this exam, and I need this grade. The one who didn't cheat will now think cheating is a worse crime than they originally thought. Mm. Integrity is more important. The whole trouble with everything in the world is how many cheaters there are. Now, over time, and this is what's key, over time, they will roll on down that pyramid, justifying their decision to cheat or their decision not to cheat. And by the time they're at the bottom, they are very far apart in their attitudes toward cheating. Not one thinks cheaters should be expelled, get them out of here. It's a really serious crime. It's not a victimless crime. We all suffer. And the one who cheated will say, oh, please, everybody cheats. It's no big deal. Now, the thing that's important to understand about this pyramid is how hard it would be to go back up. To go see that notion that, oh, I cheated once, it'll never happen again. No, you've justified cheating, and that makes it easier for you to do it the next time. So in this way, beliefs coalesce and harden, and as we look for more and more self-justifications for them. So when you see, I was thinking of this with passengers on airlines, hitting flight attendants for making them wear a mask. This was not their first decision about whether to wear a mask or not. They were already at the bottom of a pyramid of really being opposed to masking. So when you see somebody with an intransigent belief that just seems impossible to change, often a spouse or family member, you realize how much time has gone in to justifying that view.
I mean, one of the things that we talk a lot about in the context of raising tweens and teens, not just parents, but every trusted adult who raises tweens and teens, is letting go of judgment. And it struck me as I was reading that really what we're telling people to do is to let go of that big gap between self-justification. And we're going to talk a little bit about self-justification, but there's this gap between the person on the self-justification side of the pyramid and the person on the holier than thou side of the pyramid. And that gap becomes judgment. It gets filled with judgment. And it feels to me like you've given a framing for why it's so hard to follow the advice, just don't judge, because you're at the bottom of the pyramid. And that requires climbing back up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, Carol, I was going to ask if there are scenarios or ways or circumstances in which it is easier to climb back up the pyramid than others.
When I have that answer, I will win the Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm happy. I've been working for this for many years. So here's the thing. The reason that cognitive dissonance as a mental experience, if you will, it's universal. It's what lets us sleep at night. It's what allows us to keep going with beliefs that are important to us, that keep us from feeling like random marbles in a universe knocking around. They guide us. They're important for us. It's important to have beliefs that we live by. The hard part is keeping those beliefs, holding them lightly enough so that if evidence comes along to show that we're wrong, we can let them go and say, oh, isn't it good to know that my notions about XYZ were wrong? But that's what's so hard for all of us, because it makes us question how smart we are, how confident we are, how experienced we are.
But that concept of being able to sleep at night is so important. I mean, really being able to self-justify gives us permission to forgive ourselves the little things. The opposite of that is the people who ruminate, who lay in bed at night and they're just chewing over and over and over again a scenario, a conversation, a joke gone wrong. And you sit there and there's real positive power to self-justification.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
Carol, I want to give you an example. I made a decision about one of my kids. It's not, wasn't about like, should they go to the moon or not go to the moon? It was the stakes were not that high, but I made a decision about one of my kids, and he asked for permission to not have to do something. And I gave him permission to not have to do it. And afterwards, I really questioned my decision, and I felt like it wasn't the right decision. And I found myself unable for an extended period of time, late on a Saturday night while my husband and I were both getting ready for bed. I found myself unable to let go of my disappointment, fear, regret
In yourself.
in myself that I had made the wrong decision. I was seemingly incapable of self-justifying the decision. And I wish, and finally my husband just said,
stop.
Will you shut the hell up? Like, you made the decision. It's over.
Good. That's a very good reaction.
And I was like, F you. Like, come on. Like, that was not but in a way, he wasn't allowing me to self-justify, but he shut down the rumination. So I'm curious, because so often as parents, yes, we do self-justify. Oh, it was the right thing. But often we do the opposite. We are incapable of self-justifying, and we are filled with regret. What do you say to that phenomenon?
What I say is, you're a really good mother and a very unusual human. I mean, truly, this is why. For most people, self-justification is the way to avoid the rumination and the regrets and what an idiot I was feelings. I did this wrong thing. That's why mistakes were made, but not by me. It's really hard to admit. Made a wrong decision, bought the wrong car, bought the wrong house, took the wrong job, whatever the wrongness is. And so cognitive dissonance reduction is what lets us sleep at night without rumination. But as Elliot Aronson always says, there are some times when sleepless nights are called for. Because sleepless nights and thinking carefully about a decision is our path to insight, understanding, and to avoid making the same mistake in the future. The problem with self-justification is that papers over any alternative way that we might have behaved and keeps us from learning from if this decision turns out to be a mistake or not, keeps us from learning from it and not doing it again or learning how to think about it. So, of course, the goal is not endless rumination. People who suffer for years with regret and can for a very long time, that's certainly not the ideal. But when rumination allows you to take the path of thinking, well, could I have done this a different way? And what would the outcome be? Now, of course, I think perhaps in your situation, you don't know what the outcome of your decision would be, right? So this is called anticipatory aggravation. It's a psychological phenomenon that we
Is
all
that
know.
a psychological phenomenon? Because it sort of
just
sounds
made
like you
now.
made it up.
I'm going to trademark it today.
You should. It's the slogan of my life.
It's going
Carol.
to be a book title, right? So there you go. So, that's the other thing. Of course, we make a decision. We have no idea how it will turn out. Generally speaking, it's going to be all right because humans are pretty good at making it come out right. And when it doesn't, that's when you want the rumination. That's when you want to say, well, instead of hurrying to forgive ourselves, what might we have done differently?
And it is interesting, Carol. The feelings about a decision do often sort of lessen over time, right? One of the best things that I've learned as a parent and as someone who works with kids is that the feeling you have right now is not the feeling you're going to have forever. And you will move through many feelings. And that happens also with decisions and the consequences. But when people self-justify, does that somehow trick us into, and I shouldn't use that sort of slanted language, does that allow us to avoid the sort of later downstream consequences of that decision?
Well, what self-justification basically means is that once we've made a decision, we're going to throw everything at it to justify the rightness of that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that enough and throw enough stuff at it, you will never let daylight in to indicate that there might have been anything wrong with that. And that's why, our book, each chapter ends with a story of somebody who was able to break out of the cocoon of self-justification, a therapist who saw how badly she had been treating her clients, a district attorney who finally faced evidence that he'd put an innocent guy in prison, a woman whose narrative about her terrible, evil, rejecting father, when she looked at the evidence, well, you know what? No, he wasn't. She was the one who had rejected him. Memory is our greatest ally in self-justification because we can rewrite our memories to make us come out the heroes, right? We do that. And, what's the thing couples fight about, parents and children fight about? Memory. Remember that green car we had? It wasn't ever green. It was yellow. What's the matter with you? Memories, right? So memory is our self-justifying historian. And it's really humbling to realize a memory is wrong.
So, Carol, to that point, Cara and I had a fascinating conversation last night about memory. It was like, we have so many questions for you about memory and the role that it plays. And you called it our self-justification historian.
Our self-justifying historian.
Self-justifying historian. So, Cara, you
I'm raising my hand right now. For those who are not watching on YouTube, I'm raising my hand. Here's my first question that I asked Vanessa as we were giddy with excitement preparing for this recording. Is it possible for any witness on a witness stand to ever recount something in a believable testimony, given how deeply flawed our memories are. I mean, you tell these stories, not just one, story after story after story of people who have built and created memories, some literally out of nowhere. And to say that I wasn't replaying all sorts of reels from my own life, and Vanessa was doing the same thing about moments when we've been told by family members and friends, no, you've got that wrong. That is not how it happened. And then to listen or to read these stories about people who completely fabricated things. And what's amazing is you write about it with no judgment, right? It's like the brain rewrites its own narrative. Here are the 25 reasons why. And so I ask you, can a witness ever be believed? If that's what our entire justice system is built on, will you walk us through why memory is faulty and where we can believe people's account of something?
Oh, why not ask an easy, simple question for the 3 sentences? Do I have more than 3 sentences? Okay. So in a way, the research on memory, the scientific research on memory has been an important, crucial corrective to the previous view that memory works like a tape recorder. It clicks on at the moment of birth. Maybe it clicks on in the womb and it's accurate and it's in there. And my favorite image is that we think of a memory like a turnip in the brain. You just have to dig it out and uproot it, and there it is. It's a whole turnip. It's perfect. You can do what you want with it. But what we now know is that memory isn't a tape recorder. It doesn't record things perfectly. It's more like a camera that takes little bits of film in a sequence, and we fill in the connections between each frame. Memory is reconstructive. And this is, of course, the most efficient way for memory to work. We know there are a few rare and amazing individuals who do literally remember everything that ever happened to them. And they don't say this is a good thing. This is very difficult to live with. What happened in September 12th, 1971, and they know, that would really clutter up your mind. Yeah. So it's not that all memories are wrong, Kara. It's just that not all memories are right. And in between those two extremes, we need to understand how memory operates. So how it operates is, if you've had a 5th birthday party, you've had a 5th birthday party, and you remember accurately something about the 5th birthday party. But your memory over time will get embellished by what your parents told you about that birthday party, with the pictures you've seen of the birthday party. There you are in your little outfit with your little flowers in your hair blowing up the birthday cake. And you'll remember what you were wearing on your 5th birthday party. So a memory is a constellation of things that happened, things that didn't happen, suggestions that happened after the fact. And this is the nifty thing about memory. Every time we retrieve a memory and tell about it, we're changing it. We're embellishing it. We're adding a little curlicue. We're adding a new little detail. And then that becomes a visceral part of the actual memory.
So let's apply that in brutal fashion to family, parenting, teenagers. This might have triggered for me some thoughts about conversations I'd had with my own mother, where I would say, Mom, don't you remember telling me, something slightly unkind? I won't give a specific example.
The answer is no, Vanessa.
And she'll say, no. And she'll even say something like, oh, isn't that awful? No, I would never have said that. Or sometimes she'll say, no, did I do that? Oh, I have no memory of that. And as I'm reading your book about memory and how people use justification in relationship to memory, can you talk about it as self-protective? Can you talk about the role that it plays? It's not volitionally malicious, but it does play an important role.
You said that perfectly. When I say that memory is our self-justifying historian, memory's job is to keep our beliefs consonant. This is why the best predictor of our memories, say, of our past as children or teenagers and our parents is not what really happened, but what we're feeling now. So adults who have a good relationship with their parents now will tend to forget how angry they were as adolescents and teenagers. I hate you. I never want to see you again. You're the worst mother in the world. And then later you say to them, when their relationship is better with their mother, well, what do you remember about being a teenager and fighting with your mother? Never. She was so supportive. She adored me. I adored her. It was okay. So that's what we all do, whether as children or as parents. How we feel now affects what we remember. So if you're feeling really good about your child or parent now, and you get some information that in fact they did something really mean or cruel or harmful and so forth, it's going to feel very strange to them to accept that information because it's so dissonant for them. Why would I have said such a thing to you? How could I have felt such a thing? How could I have behaved that way? In the same way that teenagers, one of my favorite studies in the book is the study of teenagers and their quarrels with their mothers and fathers. Vicious, horrible quarrel. Then you come back years later and say, what do you remember about this? Oh, nothing. We never quarreled. What?
It's
right?
So fascinating because in the world of understanding growth mindset, you would think that this whole idea of needing to be consonant in the relationship could be buffered by, oh, this is great. We've got a growth mindset. Like maybe the relationship had some bumps, but we got past those bumps and it's stronger because we got past those bumps. But it doesn't seem to work that way.
Well, start from the key thing, which is our self-concept. That's the fundamental thing. I mean, the funniest finding about human psychology is that we all think we're better than average, at whatever is important. That
was so
Isn't that funny? 88% of Americans think they're better drivers than average. See, if you start there, not everybody's self-concept is built on the same issues. My late husband was the cook. He was a phenomenal cook. Took me quite a while to get up to speed cooking after he died, but it's not a central part of my identity, being a great cook. You can criticize me and it's, no big deal. If something is central to how you see yourself, if you criticize my skepticism and point out I've been really gullible about something, I will be very unhappy and I will tell you where you can go with your stupid study.
For people who have read Estrogen Matters, you can now understand where the sense of humor in the book comes from. Not that Avram doesn't have a good sense of humor, but the hilarious tone and tongue-in-cheek in the book is very clearly Carol's imprint.
Well, I thank you, Vanessa. Thank you. Yes,
Vanessa and I haven't figured out which one of us is funnier yet, but we'll get to that by the end of the interview.
Tie. If I'm a judge here, I'm definitely
right answer, Carol. Thank you for not having any dissonance in this situation.
It's all consonant.
My job is to be your impartial, objective.
Absolutely.
I'm a whole psychologist. Okay.
So, if your sense of self, right?
Yes.
Let's take an example. Let's start with a parent who sees themselves as a good parent, right? I love my kid. I'm trying my best. And then they turn around and they scream at their kid for some minor infraction. And they're left in a situation where on the one hand, they think of themselves as a good parent. On the other hand, they've done something that they shouldn't have done and they feel badly about. What happens next, Carol? How do we handle that self-concept versus, self-justification, the cognitive dissonance there?
Well, the ideal way is to separate the two elements. I am a good parent, and I just did something that a good parent really shouldn't do. No? So what do I want to do here? Change my view of myself as a good parent or minimize the thing I did that wasn't so good? Those are my choices.
Is there not a third choice?
Of course there's a third choice. There's always a third choice. The third choice is that you go along saying both of those things. Both of those things. When you are able to do both of those things consciously, because dissonance reduction is like a homeostatic mechanism. It operates unconsciously. You justify something, rationalize something, and off you go without thinking twice. But if you are able to separate those two elements, then you've given yourself space to think about what you did and to decide what to do next. Mm-hmm. So you could say, I don't really want to change my view of myself as a good mother. I really want to be a good mother, but I can improve my mothering skills by paying attention to this thing that I did and deciding what I want to do about it. I want to apologize to my kid. I want to have a conversation about it. I want to assess what happened here. And I want to say, I'm never going to promise that I'm never going to do something bad ever again. I am a human being. Your job is to understand that I'm a human being, but my job is to hear you. And that's how we're able to change, not by rejecting the bad thing we did or changing our views of ourselves, but learning from it.
So in essence, you can balance, you can have at the same time self-reflection and self-justification.
Exactly.
A little dose of each. And I think we, and by we, I'm going to say I, but maybe Vanessa, you agree, misuse the term.
I'm waiting until you say what you're going to say.
I misuse the term narcissism a lot. And I misuse it in this context. Like when someone's self-justification seems to overpower all of the decisions they're making, I will sometimes use the term narcissism, and that's not the right term, right? That's not what this is.
No, it's ego defensiveness, which we all have to one degree or another. The lessons of cognitive dissonance, I think, really the bottom line when you really understand it, is it's a form of humility control. Mm-hmm. It's a way of letting in some air into our self-assurance. Elliot Aronson used to do wonderful workshops on this issue because one of the fascinating things about all the effort we put into not admitting mistakes is that when we do admit them, it's like removing a 500-pound boulder from your neck. It's not, nobody says, how dare you admit you were wronged? What do they say? They say, thank you. They say, great. Where shall we go for the weekend? It's a relief to let it go. And yet people put so much time and energy into not admitting they were wrong, but admitting it would lead to such better outcomes.
Do teenagers experience more cognitive dissonance than, people our age? And are they capable cognitively of managing it in the same way that a fully mature adult might?
Well, teenagers have a whole lot of other things going on. So first of all, it's not like any one group or any one sex or any one ethnicity has more or less cognitive dissonance, because all that cognitive dissonance is a clash between two beliefs. I mean, for a teenager, mom wants me to do this, my friends want me to do that. That's the classic. Right. Which decision do I make? If I listen to mom, my friends will be mad. If I listen to my friends, my mom will be mad. So teenagers have those kinds of decisions all the time, which is, of course, a terrifically difficult thing for the parents, as we all know. So no, they have plenty of occasions of cognitive dissonance, and they reduce dissonance the same way any other human being on the planet does, but they don't yet have the experience of making lots of decisions, dealing with the consequences and fallout of those decisions, admitting mistakes. That's where individual differences in learning come in. Understanding mistakes don't mean you're stupid. Mistakes don't mean you're a terrible person. Mistakes don't mean your life is over. Mistakes just mean a mistake. Now, what do we do next? That's what children have to learn.
So, Carol, and that's a life experience thing, not a sort of stage of brain development thing. But when I think about teenagers, and I love teenagers, love them. I think they're fabulous. the phrase mistakes were made, but not by me feels like they should all be wearing t-shirts that say that very phrase.
Another marketing opportunity, Vanessa.
Yes, I'm gonna, you can trademark that. It's all yours. It's all yours. But so your point is that they're having to balance a lot of different tension. There's like more opportunities for cognitive dissonance, not that they necessarily manage it differently than, but that there's so many points where they're not equipped yet to sort of handle holding those two things to be true.
I would put it that way. And I would also say that they're at a time of developing a self-concept. Who am I? What am I? What kind of person am I? And when I say, what do I want to be? I don't mean what I want to be professionally, but what kind of person am I? Those are developmental challenges, and they are all in a state of formation throughout, of course, childhood and adolescence. It's a lifelong process, but certainly for teenagers, the vulnerability of the self-concept is kind of always in flux. So a decision the concern is that enough bad decisions then come to define who they are and make them feel, well, that's the kind of person I'm no good. I can't do anything. I'll never get out of this. I'm hopeless. I'm useless. I'm unattractive. All of those, we would talk about self-concept being the primary centerpiece of dissonance because for a person with low self-esteem or insecure self-esteem, such as a teenager, getting good feedback is dissonant too. I know you told me I just did terrifically on this paper, but it was a fluke. You'll see. It was just a fluke. I'm no good. See? So the self-concept is primary. And so for a teenager who's feeling insecure or uncertain, that's why those are the most vulnerable years. Yes.
Okay. So let's braid some of these threads together. We've got teenagers who are in the midst of their identity formation, individuation, but also figuring out who they are, what they're interested in, and their brain is rapidly maturing and won't be mature until they're well into and through their 20s. That's one piece. The next is we've got the concept of misremembering, that we build memories and evolve what those memories look like in ways that are predictable. Scientists understand this, and yet it means that the sort of core image of what happened or what was said is fundamentally altered in a brain. Okay, we got that. And now let's add sort of a third piece, a third thread. And this is this concept of self-justification and doubling down on the way you see something. And what I want to understand, Carol, is how do these three things intersect? If you have an individual who is in the process of figuring out who they are, their memories are constantly changing, and they're hardwired to double down on why they behave the way they behaved, even though they may not understand why they behave the way they behave, or they may not like why they behave the way they behave. Help us. How do kids themselves or the adults who support them help kids break out of certain paths and individually grow and change to be the person they want to be? How do they find the memories they want to hold on to? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, those are impossible questions. Thank you very much. This has been lovely talking with you. Your questions are fabulous, and you have indeed woven a braid. So how to take some of these apart? First of all, this is a word about this hardwired business. Cognitive dissonance is hardwired in the sense that is how the brain works to alleviate discomforting beliefs, thoughts, blah, blah. Okay, let's us sleep. Fine. What's not hardwired is how we learn to deal with dissonance. There's nothing hardwired about an inability to say I was wrong. And those are learned skills. that's why we have conversations about, did you do the wrong thing? What could you have done differently? Let's think about this. Why it doesn't mean the thing I keep saying over and over that so many American kids believe is that if I make a mistake, I'm stupid. This is just, it's ubiquitous in American culture and is to be fought tooth and nail. But okay. That's a learned thing. Now, as for memories, and by the way, Carol, you said earlier, are any memories right? Yes, I'm happy to report. Some memories are right. You probably remember who you're married to. Probably. You probably remember who your parents are, and you might even remember your 5th birthday party. Yes, of course, many of our memories are accurate. Let's not throw out the whole mechanism that's in there. Just, we want to hold our memories with humility at how malleable they can be. And we want to be open to the funny, life-enhancing, and informative evidence when we're wrong, what it can teach us. We have examples, I think, in the memory chapter of this. The memory scientist who believed that he was going to go to graduate school and his mother didn't want him to go, and he she should really be home with his mother, but they had this big argument. Years later, he was finally able to read the letters that she'd written to him. She was the one who wanted him to go away to graduate school. He was the one who wanted to stay home near mom. So what do you learn from something like this? The amusing and charming frailty of memory to support how we have always seen ourselves. And as our self-concept changes, so will our memories. Just get used to it. It's just how things work. And Vanessa, as about mothers saying, I would never have said such a thing. I could never have done such a thing. How could you accuse me of having been so mean to you? Okay. And you know perfectly well it did happen. But you might also have more understanding about why she can't accept that it did. Mm-hmm. It's too threatening to her self-concept.
Yeah, I mean, I found that so powerful that it's so tempting to think of people's denial of things that happened as, as malicious. But if you reframe it as self-protective, as something that helps them not just sleep at night, but helps with their self-esteem, you're able to kind of give them a little bit of grace, or in your own case, give yourself some grace. I'm wondering, Carol, how we instill it in kids, how we help them build that muscle, right? It's a learned skill. And how do we do that in a way that doesn't either feel like, oh God, are we really having this dinner table conversation? Because if we are, I'm going to get up. Or in a way that doesn't, that stretches them, but doesn't break them. How do we find that spot as we sort of hope to instill the ability to frankly say, I screwed up. I'm sorry. I want to take it over again, or some version of that.
Well, first of all, it's not something you can require of a child. It's only something you can demonstrate and model for yourself. Mm-hmm. We all know children learn the most from how they see their parents interacting and how they see how their parents are living in the world and how their parents negotiate mistakes and conflicts that they have. Those are everlasting lessons. Which ones will sink in? Always hard to predict. Teaching, like parenting, I often say, it's like the lessons are like a torpedo. They go underwater and you don't quite know when they're going to burst out. It could be years later when the person says, now I get what it was that teacher was trying to say to me. Now I get what mama was always trying to say to me, and they won't get it until they're in a circumstance where your lesson to them, your example for them suddenly has application.
We always joke that there are two kinds of parents. Obviously, there are not only two kinds of parents, but in this scenario, there are the parents who say, when presented with a kid doing something wrong, my child would never. Or the parent who says, oh, it was definitely my kid. For sure, it was my kid. Are those both examples of people trying to make sense of the cognitive dissonance? Like, help us make sense of those two reactions.
Well, Well, it has to do with what their view of their kid is. Is this kid's behavior completely consonant with everything I already know about this kid? Then my kid would do that. But if your view is that your child is never capable of making a mistake or behaving badly or bullying another child in school or stealing, or because after all, your child's behavior with you is not your child's behavior with peers. Mm-hmm. Are we all clear on that one, right? So now you get information. There's the dissonance for a parent. You get information that your beloved child, who is perfect, has been bullying or stealing or cheating or doing bad things. Not my boy, not my child. Right? Now that is, of course, that is a parental reaction that is a huge change from what it was when I was a kid growing up. This is the old when I was a kid, but, it used to be parents did not march into the principal's office to defend their child from cheating. Now it's my child, whatever they've done, it's okay. That is parents' efforts to reduce the dissonance.
Is that dissonance that's internal to that child, meaning like the parents are trying to resolve it because they think it's dissonant for that child? Or is it parent-child dissonance where if the kid is doing that thing, it's dissonant with the way the parent wants their parenting to be perceived?
Oh, precisely. Oh, right? Precisely.
Yeah. And so it's a little of both though, right? Because if you think your kid is angelic, and there are parents who have allowed their memory to reshape so that their kids can do no wrong, right? And for those parents, it does feel like there are two levels of dissonance.
Well, I think that's true. But I mean, those are indeed the two themes. One is, I'm a great parent, therefore my child would never do any of these things. And now you're telling me my child has? Well, no, it's not even possible. My kid is an angel, It's, for many, it's very central to their self-definition as parents. There's a wonderful book by Judith Rich Harris called The Nurture Assumption that this was an Avram Blooming style book in the sense that it just blew up the developmental psychology literature, because she argued that how children turn out, it has something to do with their genetics, something to do with how they were reared, and mostly it has to do with their peers. And actually, genetics being a big part of this too. The idea that you can raise a child to be anything you want that child to be is completely flawed. Mm-hmm. And that parents need to cut themselves some slack about this, because the real influence on children once they are out of the house in school is going to be their peers, And this means that for parents, what it means to be a good parent also has to be, who are the kids my kid is hanging out with? What's their environment like? Because they are going to want to conform to their peers more than parents. What they eat, what they wear, what tats they have, what their goals are, what sex they think they are. That's going to be peer-driven even more than parent-driven.
And, something we talk about a lot on this podcast and fits right into this paradigm is that when parents go from being able to construct the friendships themselves, right? They're navigating it all. The kids are little and the parents are organizing the friendships and making the play dates happen. The parents can pick other families that feel consonant. But when the kids get older and make their own choices, sometimes in spite of the parents, right? Sometimes having nothing to do with the parents, that dissonance too gets tricky, and letting go of those old family-based friendships and morphing them into just your adult friendship is the only way to resolve that sort of level of distance. You're not going to be best friends with all the families of all the kids who are in your kids' peer group. And that is totally predictable. And this conversation has everything to do with that.
I think so. Vanessa, you're looking very unhappy.
No, I'm thinking about, you write about the Milgram experiment in the book. And my interpretation of it is that once you make a sort of wrong or immoral decision, it sort of cascades you into making continuing and maybe even more and more immoral decisions. And I was thinking about that in the context of teens and how the stakes are really high, right? There's substance use and drunk driving, and you talked about cheating on tests and, whether or not they have safe sex and, a variety of things where they can sort of self-justify in the moment. Is there a way, Carol, to sort of pause that cascade, right? We talked about not being able to climb back up the pyramid, but is there a way as a parent or trusted adult or to empower the kid themselves to kind of paralyze that sort of negative cascade?
Well, yes and no, I would say. So the first thing to understand, and you've identified it really, is that if you're right there at the top of the pyramid making a decision, whatever it is, safe sex, drugs, and so forth, what are the things that will encourage you to go off the pyramid in one direction or the other? What are those influences? Because for many people, it's just almost spontaneous decision. You read some sensational sex accusation case in the paper. Who should I believe? You make a decision. But so for a teenager, do I want to go along with my peers or not? Often the decision is impulsive. It's not reasoned. It's not thought out. It's a conformity peer experiment, really. And you need to think, and the teenager needs to be aware of the power of that group influence. They know this. They know this because, as we all know how difficult it is to be the one person who isn't doing what everybody else is. The one woman professional in a group of men, the one man in a group of women, the one anything, the one token dissonant, the one whistleblower, the one deviant, the one who gets bullied, the one who says, no, I'm not going to go along with this. Every kid knows they're going to pay a social price if they make that choice. So I think parents can help their children to understand the reasons for those social costs. This is indeed kind of what happens, but mostly they're going to have to learn by screwing up.
And then
like the rest of us.
Right.
Like the rest of us.
And then they're going to need to say, mistakes were made.
Oh yeah.
My new life philosophy. Actually, Carol, part of the reason I love this book so much and I love your thinking is because the number one thing I have gotten better about as a parent, and my 19-year-old memorialized this in an episode that Cara and I did with our two 19-year-old sons, is owning up to my mistakes. And so I feel self-justified by your book because it values, acknowledging your mess ups and kind of moving on and all of that. But I just have to tell you, it is such a privilege and such an honor to have you on the podcast, to be able to learn from you. I'm so excited for our listeners to be able to really dive into this totally fascinating topic. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you for joining us.
Vanessa, Cara, how can I possibly thank you? You've been the most enjoyable of readers as well as hosts. You read the book. Amazing. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been such fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.